Lt Col Susan Lee grew up in northwest Oklahoma and entered the U.S. Air Force at the age of 39 as a registered nurse. While serving in a remote assignment at Ocean Air Force Base, she was selected by the Air Force to attend medical school in Bethesda, Maryland, and graduated with a master's degree as a family nurse practitioner in 2001. She has practiced as a family nurse practitioner in the Air Force since then, and also served 3 years as the family nurse practitioner consultant subject matter experts for the Air Force. Surgeon General. Lieutenant Colonel Lee and her husband moved to Derby, Kansas almost 2 years ago, and she now serves as a medical service flight commander at McConnell Air Force Base. They plan to retire here in another 2 years. Lieutenant Colonel Lee.
Thank you, Commander. It is an honor to be asked to speak at a service like this. Memorial Day is very special to me for many reasons, starting with I come from a long line of military folks in my family. My great-great-great-grandfather fought for the Union in the Civil War. My grandfather, all of his brothers, and my grandmother's brothers all fought in World War I. My dad and his brother and two brother-in-laws and my husband's father all fought in World War II. I had an uncle that saw service in Korea. My oldest brother fought in Vietnam as a Marine. Had 3 cousins also served in Vietnam. 2 other brothers, a niece, a brother-in-law, and my son-in-law have all served in the military. I had a nephew who served a year in Afghanistan. He made it home safely, thanks be to God. I cherish my heritage of my family, and I first wanted to come into, I thought, the Army when I was 12 years old, when that oldest brother was serving in Vietnam. That was the first time we had war right on TV, right in your living rooms. And it was horrifying to me, but I wanted to go and do what I could. Now, being 12 years old, you can't do much. But that's when I got the drive to be a military nurse. Things kind of changed over time in high school, and at 16, I met my husband, fell in love, and we got married when I was 17. And those dreams of nursing kind of went by the wayside. Life got in the way. We raised our family. He had a really good job, but it wasn't in a place where I could go to school. So that just kind of went by the wayside until at age 35, I had the opportunity to figure out, what do you really want to do? And I still wanted to be a nurse. And so at 35, I started college into a nursing program at Edmond, Oklahoma. And when I graduated, I had not even thought about military service because I was so old. But the recruiters come out to snap up all the young nurses, and I talked to one, and he said, because I didn't have a criminal record, and I had made very good grades in school, and I had very good health, that he could get a waiver, and he did. Now, this was not in wartime at that time. This was in 1994, and things were really pretty calm, but I got a waiver, so I came into the active duty Air Force at age 39. My husband's brother is who swore me into office at my commissioning ceremony. He's a retired colonel from the Army. So I have a long family heritage to live up to here. I haven't seen combat myself. I really wanted to go, but my number never came up. I was needed here at home, working, teaching, that kind of stuff. But I have seen firsthand what war does. My only deployment was to Bosnia, to a NATO base, and I set up a clinic from scratch for the American troops there, serving with NATO, and ended up taking care of the Brits and the Canadians as well. But that's my only deployment. But I saw firsthand, combat makes people do things they never thought they could do, never thought they would do. It makes them be up 36 hours straight with no sleep. Makes them bond with each other. Builds relationships, camaraderie. The bonds that can never be broken. The people you serve with in combat become your sisters and brothers forever. But on the other hand, I've also seen firsthand what war does, what combat does. I worked before I came to Kansas, I worked at the Army Medical Center at Landstuhl in Germany. there's an Air Force squadron there, and I was one of the providers there. Now, my job wasn't to take care of all the casualties being flown in from Afghanistan and Iraq, but rather to take care of the staff and their families that took care of the soldiers coming in. Also took care of the Department of Defense teachers, contractors, those folks working in Europe. In taking care, though, of the staff, I came to realize right away that PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is not limited to combat survivors. The staff in the operating room, on the wards, in the ICU, in the emergency room where these troops come in, these people see things every day that you cannot imagine. One time I had a girl come, she was 19 years old, and I have a grandson who was the same age at that time. And she came in to see me in the clinic. Her supervisor had sent her down. This was her first assignment out of her training. And she was an OR tech. And so they took her in for her first day on the job, and it was to do a simple, what they call a wound washout. And so she thought, I got this. I've been trained, I know what to do, I can do this. But when they got in there and she saw the wounds, she backed up and passed out. She was 19 years old, and there was no way to prepare these kids for what they have to see and do. So even though they don't see combat, they still have the struggles. Different, yes, but they still have the struggles. Mortuary affairs unit I took care of. And these were the 19, 20-year-old kids putting body parts back together in coffins to give these soldiers, these casualties, a final respectable ride home. And that can do something to these young kids. PTSD isn't just for combat. At that hospital, they had divided the staff into 3 manpower teams. When casualties were happening fast and furious over in Afghanistan, in Iraq before I got there, but then while I was there it was more Afghanistan, they would fly the wounded to Ramstein, Germany, which is 8 miles from my hospital, and then they had ambulance buses they'd load them up in, they'd bring them by the busload up the mountain to Landstuhl. And so you knew when you were in your everyday clinic and you heard manpower team, they had 3 different names for them, but they call a manpower team, or maybe 2 manpower teams. You knew there was busloads of folks coming. And their job was to unload them and take them to where they needed to go. Whether it was straight to ICU, to the ER for more triage, straight to the operating room in some cases. And again, it's just everyday folks, the dining room facility people, everybody was on a team. So we all had to help. And so you see things. And you see what these men and women paid for our freedom with, when you see the wounds that they carried. One day I was walking down the hall. When the walking wounded came in there, you could see, you always knew, if you worked there, you always knew who they were because they had this yellow bag, kind of like a plastic grocery bag, but it was bright yellow. And it had a map of the hospital because it was huge. Schedules of things. It would have their schedule, which appointments they had, what time, already planned for them by the time they got there. But you always knew that was the new guy if they were walking around carrying a yellow sack. Because by day 2, they had ditched the sack. One day I was on the way to the dining room myself, and I saw a young Marine, and he was walking with crutches down the hall to get to the cafeteria, and he had his yellow bag with his crutch, struggling to get down there, and he had both feet bandaged up all the way up to his knees. Big old white puffy bandages. And so we'd always talk to him, and I said, "Welcome to Germany. Glad you made it here." And just kept conversation, try to make him at ease, and I said, "It looks like you got your feet banged up a little bit." And he stopped where he was and looked at me in the face and said, "Ma'am, I'm just glad I still have 2 legs." And that's when it brought it home to me what our freedoms cost. You may not agree politically with what's happened in Iraq and in Afghanistan, or even in Vietnam, or even in Korea, or World War II, or I. But it's our responsibility to support those troops who go. They don't go because they voted for that decision. They go because they're sent, because they care about the country. They may not agree with everything political. It's not their fault. Just like in Vietnam, it wasn't those men and women's fault if people back home didn't agree with the politics. And it's time we take care of all these people. In the last century alone, hundreds of thousands of people have given ultimate sacrifice for us. for us everyday people to come out to a cemetery or to a park and celebrate holidays. Just in the last century, in World War I, there were 116,516 casualties, Americans. In World War II, 405,399. In Korea, 33,686. In Vietnam, 58,209. In the Gulf War, 294. In Iraq, 4,404. In Afghanistan, 1,086. But that number is still climbing because we still have folks who were injured there still dying from the wounds. And occasionally we do still have one or two lost in fighting even today. These numbers are astounding, but they don't even count the training accidents, the clandestine operations that you and I don't ever read about in the paper, but they're happening every day. And even humanitarian missions, when there's national disasters, drought, starvation, different things like that. Occasionally we lose service members in those situations too. What I want you to think about today, besides all these numbers, someone said recently, not everyone who died in war died in combat. Not everyone who came home ever left the war. Invisible wounds like PTSD and TBI, traumatic brain injury, have claimed more lives at home than in combat now. Every day, 22 vets commit suicide. Multiply that by 365 days. 8,000 per year. Look around you here at the cemetery. How many days till all of us would disappear at that rate? It wouldn't take long.